Hello everyone, you're welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Selim. Very pleased to meet you. Thank you for stopping by. Today I'm going to show you guys how to make a full shoulder princess dart bustier. I already have a video on my channel where I show you how to make an off shoulder princess dart bustier. If you want to see that video, then don't forget to click the link right here. So without further ado, I'm going to show you how to cut the full shoulder princess dart bustier and also how to sew the full shoulder princess dart bustier. So if you want to see how I do this, then keep watching. Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. The first thing I'm doing is drawing a zero line, which is where all my measurements is going to start from. And then I'm marking her bust points measurements and her under bust measurements. Now you'd also need your nipple to nipple measurements, and that nipple to nipple measurement is usually 8 inches. In this case, it's also 8 inches, and so I just added 1 inch sewing allowance, which made it 9 inches, and then dividing that 9 inches by 2, I got 4.5 inches, simply because I divided it by 2 because my fabric is folded in half. So that's the 4.5 inches I just marked now. So I'm just drawing that line, just a straight line. Now I'm marking 2 inches from the under bust. Now this 2 inches is because she's not very busty. Now if you're sewing for someone that is very busty, you can use 2.5 inches allowance, but 2 inches usually works fine. Now I'm marking her shoulder measurement and I'm adding 2 inches allowance. Now from the first 1 inch allowance, I'm going to draw a diagonal line to meet the bust point, and from the second 2 inch allowance, I also drew a diagonal line to meet that same bust point. And now from that 2 inches mark, I'm just drawing a curve to meet those two diagonal lines. Now I'm just cutting along those lines. It's important that you get a very nice curve, because that is going to be the shape of your bustier, right? It's very important that your curve is nice and neat. It doesn't look skewed in any way. So yeah, that's very important. So just try to get clean curves and clean cuts when you're doing this. Now moving on to the back, the front bit is already done. I'm just drawing that same zero line I drew in the front. I'm drawing that at the back. I'm also marking or drawing that bust point line, and I'm also drawing the under bust line, just like I did with the front. Now the back has a zipper allowance, which is about 1.5 inches, and that is what I'm drawing now. Now replicating that nipple to nipple line, which is the 4.5 inches I had marked previously. Now I'm replicating that same 2 inches I marked in the front, but this time for the back it goes all the way up to the bust point, whereas in the front that 2 inches marked stopped at the under bust, but this one actually goes all the way to the bust point. Now from that 2 inches mark, I'm drawing a diagonal line to meet the second 1 inch shoulder allowance, and then from the actual nipple to nipple line, I also drew a diagonal line to meet the first 1 inch shoulder allowance. Now I'm just cutting along those lines. Now over to our sewing machine, I'm simply just placing the back pieces right sides facing, and I'm just sewing that. It's quite straightforward. I would really encourage you guys to go watch my off shoulder princess dart bustier video. I'm going to put the card up here, simply because it's kind of easy for you to understand, or it's kind of like a foundation for you to understand this particular video. So it's important that you watch that one and also watch this one, because I want you guys to really understand how this thing works. Now this is the front pieces, or these are the front pieces rather, placing them right sides facing, and I'm also sewing that down. Now the curved part, which is the bustier part, like the curved bust part, is at the top. So I'm simply moving the curve to match with the straight one underneath. So remember that the straight one is not really straight, but it's like a straight line. Yeah, the actually straight line, one straight line, and then a diagonal line is underneath. So I'm simply moving the curved one to match with the straight one underneath. I really hope you understand what I'm saying. I explained it better in my off shoulder princess dart bustier video, but I'll do my best to really explain it again. this time, but simply join those pieces together. Make sure that they are, as neat as possible. Yeah. So once you've done that, you're going to take it back to the table and you're going to actually cut, the actual shape and style or design you actually want to cut. This is just simply like a framework for you to go ahead and cut the actual design that you want. Now, I'm simply dividing her bust measurements by 4. That's why I'm folding my tape like that. And then once I get that point, I'm simply going to add 2 inches allowance. So it's actually now that I'm actually marking her bust points and other measurements that I need. Now I'm also folding or dividing her shape measurements by 4. And I'm also getting that measurement and adding 2 inches allowance as well. Now I'm just going to draw a slanted line to, join those 2 points together. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide her shoulder measurements by 2 inches. And that's why I folded my tape like that. And then I also added about 1.5 or 1 inch allowance. Now I simply drew a curve to meet that, shoulder allowance at that point. Take note that from the shoulder to where that curve started, which is the armhole actually took 9 inches. Now I'm simply marking her neck. The width of the neck, I want it to be 4.5 inches, and the depth, I want it to be 6 inches. Now I'm simply drawing a curve to, connect those 2 points together. For the back, I'm making the depth 2 inches, but the width is the same for the front and for the back. Now, if you want to have a V-neck, all you have to do is, instead of drawing a curve to join those points, you can simply draw a slanted or diagonal line to join those points, and you have yourself a V-neck. So whatever kind of neck you want, this will be the time to actually draw it and actually cut it out. Now I'm just confirming that her bust points and under bust are accurate. And when you've confirmed that the under bust and the bust points are accurate, now it's the time for you to cut your half length. I usually use 2.5 inches for my half length, just so that when I join it with the peplon or the down part of the gown, it actually still works fine. This is what we have when we're done. And now I simply cut out these pieces, that's the lining pieces. I simply cut them on my fabric so that I can actually go ahead and start the real sewing work. Having done that, now I'm just joining 2 pieces, the 2 back pieces of my fabric. I'm just joining them together, right sides facing. And I'm simply, whatever piece I have on top, I simply turn it or twist it just so that it matches with the piece that's underneath. That is very important. You're not trying to change or turn the piece that's underneath, but you're always trying to turn or twist the piece that is on top. I hope that makes sense. I sincerely do. So what I mean is, as you can see now, I've just started joining the other 2 pieces of the back. Now, as you can see, I am actually moving the piece on top to match with the piece underneath while I'm sewing, not trying to move the piece that's under. That would just be impossible to do. And once we've done that, this is what we have. One side, the 2 sides rather of the back, the 2 pieces of the back. Now this is the front bit. This is the center front, and I've already gummed it with my breast pad or breast, whatever you call it, but I call it breast pad. And I also gummed the side piece, that's the center side piece. Yeah, I also gummed it with the breast pad as well. Now I'm sewing from bottom to top for this first one. For the other one, it's going to be slightly different. Now you can see that I'm moving the curve to match with the straight one underneath. This is quite tricky, but I believe with practice you'll be able to do it and do it very well. But I'm simply twisting or moving the curved one on top, which is the top part, which is the piece on top. I'm simply moving it to match with the piece underneath. Now, when I'm doing the other side, so when I'm joining, the side piece to the center front, on the other side, it's slightly different, okay? It's slightly different, and I'll show you the difference in a bit. So for this one, you can see that I had sewn from bottom to top. With this one, as we did this other side, I'm also going to start from bottom, but the only difference is that I'm not going to sew from the bottom all the way up. I'm going to sew from the bottom, and then I'm going to stop where I have that curved part, right? Which is what I just did now. I sewed from the bottom, and then when I got to the curved part, I actually stopped there. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use my hands, or my fingers in this case, to kind of match the two pieces together. So I'm trying to like move the curved bits, move both of them, just trying to align them together so that I know where they start at the top, right? So this is where they start at the top, and then I just start from that point at the top, and then I'm just sewing all the way down. Guys, English is very difficult, okay? English is difficult, so try and understand what I'm saying. We are all Nigerians here. So please understand what I'm saying, okay? It might be a bit difficult for me to explain, but just try to, see what I'm doing and try to understand what I'm actually saying. So I'm simply, just moving the top piece to make sure that it matches with the bottom piece, and we have ourselves something very neat and something very nice. Like I said, this can be a bit tricky, but with practice, it gets easier. So this is what we have when we're done. So we're done with the fabric now. We're moving on to the lining. Now we're going to do the same thing we did with the fabric with the lining, and I'm also going to explain again so you guys find it easy to do. So now for the first one, I'm simply sewing from the bottom all the way to the top. Now I'm moving the curved piece on top to match the straight piece underneath, right? So it's the curved one on top that I'm moving to match the straight one underneath. It is crazy to think that you can actually move the one at the bottom. That is very difficult to do, so it's easier to do this. And then having done that one, I'm going to take the other piece, which is the side piece, and then I'm also going to join it with the center piece. Now with this one, I'm sewing until I get to where the curved part starts, and then I take it out, and then I'm aligning both pieces to, just aligning both pieces so that I can see where it starts at the top, right? Or see where the both pieces meet at the top. And once I've gotten that point, I'm starting from that point, and I'm sewing all the way down to where the curved part ends, which is where I had previously stopped sewing, right? You can as well just sew all the way till you get to the bottom part. It doesn't really matter, but the point is just try to see how you can get it right either way. So now moving on to the back piece. The back pieces are quite easy to join. They're not difficult at all. Again, I'm moving the piece on top to match the piece underneath, which is like the general rule of thumb. Joining the other two back pieces, I'm simply going to move the one on top again. So it's always the one on top that moves, not the one underneath. Guys, if you can remember this when you're doing your Princess Dart Bustier or any dart at all, it makes life so much easier. So having done that, I'm simply placing the fabric and the lining pieces, which this is one side of the back piece. I'm simply joining them right sides facing at the neck. So I'm simply sewing the neck part first. I'm just following the curve that I already have, so I'm just sewing that curve and tacking it at the beginning and at the end. Now I'm opening that up, and then I'm going to top stitch. But before I top stitch, I'm going to make sure that the tiny allowance I get from sewing both pieces together, that allowance faces the lining part and not the fabric. So it faces the lining and not the fabric. So while it's facing the lining, I'm simply going to top stitch on top of that allowance. Does that make sense, guys? If it makes sense, say yes, it makes sense, Silem, in the comment section. So I did the same thing for the other piece as well. Now I'm simply, flipping that to the back like it was before. Now I'm going to make sure that I can see just a little bit of the fabric on this side where the lining is. It's important so that the lining doesn't come out. And then I'm going to sew just a straight line to close or to join the lining with the fabric. On the other side, I'm also going to sew a straight line as well. And that would simply close up the lining with the fabric. Now I'm just turning that to the right side, and I went ahead and I did the same thing for the second back piece, and I also ironed it to make sure that it's nice and smooth. Moving on to the front bit, I'm simply placing the lining and facing it with the fabric right sides facing. I'm also going to start from the neck, and I'm just going to sew both of them together. So simply just follow the curve of the neck. If you have a V-neck or a sweetheart neck, whatever neckline you created, simply follow that line and just sew it together. You need about 1/4 of an inch allowance for this. You don't need up to 1/2 inch because that'll be too much. So 1/4 of an inch sewing allowance works fine for turning the neck of your lining and your fabric. Now I'm going to open it up, and just like I did with the back piece, I'm going to make sure that the tiny allowance I have faces the lining, and then I'm going to top stitch on the lining side and not on the fabric side, okay? Because you don't want any sewing line to show. When your top is worn, it's not even going to look like you sewed the neck. The neck is going to look very, very, very neat, so it wouldn't even be obvious that you sewed the neck. Now I'm going to sew the sides as well. Starting from one side, I'm going to sew that side down, and then I'm going to do the same and sew the other side down as well. Now I'm going to turn it to the right side. Now it's very, very important that you iron your Princess Dad Bustier, like iron it very, very neatly. Guys, I can make a video on how to pad your Princess Dad Bustier and how to iron it, like really iron it very well, the right way to iron it. If you want that video, let me know in the comment section down below. Now I'm just going to join the two back pieces together with a very loose stitch, because I'm going to loosen it and I'm going to attach my zipper later when I've joined this to the down parts. I'm actually making a dress, so when I join it with the bottom part of the dress, I'm going to open that this zip allowance, and then I'm going to attach a zipper. So basically this is what we have. That's the back piece, and this one on top is the front piece. You can see the Princess Dad Bustier looking very good. Thank you guys for watching. Do not forget to subscribe, like this video, and share it with your friends. Bye.